So I am Dr. Lindsay Malone. I am an assistant professor at NDSU in the School of Natural Resource Sciences. And I'm tasked with giving you a very brief, but sort of primer thinking about carbon cycling and kind of why we really care about carbon. Um, yeah. So with that, why do we care about carbon? We might all care about carbon for different reasons. So maybe some of these things will resonate with you and but other ones won't. Yeah. So we've heard there's a lot of hype around carbon for sure, the last few years. So think about carbon programs, carbon markets and credits. I know Dave Ripplinger is going to talk this afternoon about carbon credits a little bit. This concept of carbon neutrality. Maybe you've heard of carbon intensity scores or a low CI score, and carbon sequestration as well. So all of this is really linked to this idea that there is a big link between climate change and carbon, which is partially, well, not partially, is because we have elevated CO2 levels in the atmosphere. CO2 is a greenhouse gas. We do need the greenhouse gas effect, but we have too much of it. So it's kind of like a too thick of a blanket right now. But so that's kind of the perspective on why we care about carbon from the current markets standpoint, and Dave will talk about that more later today. I really wanted to give you this primer thinking about why we care about carbon from this scientific and ecological point of view. So obviously carbon is this major building block of life on Earth. It is an element that it is the majority of our bodies, it's the majority of plant biomass. It's really chemically versatile. It can form inorganic compounds and organic compounds, which is part of why it is so important for biological activity, but also geochemical and atmospheric activity as well. Over the past approximately 100 years, we have seen this rise in CO2 levels that is well beyond previous levels. So this is the global monthly mean CO2 recorded by the NOAA over the ocean, actually, from 1980 to up to 2025. So I just pulled this figure yesterday. So this is an increasing CO2 level across the globe. But you might notice that this line has some wiggles to it. So the black line is the average annually, but then the red lines or the red points are the average monthly. So if we hone in on the last 5 years, we can actually see that fluctuation is fairly dramatic. And in my class, I'm in teaching mode. In my class, I have my students kind of ponder why this is happening. And it's because of summer in the Northern Hemisphere. So photosynthesis is such a huge component of the global carbon cycle that we actually see that annual fluctuation or seasonal fluctuation in global CO2 levels when it is summer in North America. So in summertime, those levels are drawing down because carbon is being pulled into plant biomass, and then respiration is happening, more respiration is happening over fall and winter months. Spring months, right now, there's probably quite a bit more respiration than there is photosynthesis, at least in North Dakota. Yeah. So looking at this from so we've talked about kind of this CO2 levels overall. This is a view of the global carbon cycle from NASA in 2011. I need to create my own version of this, but I think this one just really captures everything that I think is helpful to point out. So in particular, there are a lot of different pools of carbon. The atmosphere is just one of them. The soil carbon is just one of them. There is a lot of carbon in the ocean, a lot of carbon in the deep ocean, a lot of carbon in fossil fuels. This is where fossil fuels come from. But there's these fluxes as well. So these sort of movements between pools, transformation between types of carbon, those are what we call fluxes when we're talking about nutrients that are cycling. Photosynthesis is a really major one, but it is also tends to be paired with a lot of respiration. So in general, one of my kind of take-home points here is that photosynthesis and agriculture play a major role in this global carbon cycle. But respiration from both plants, so plants are respiring as well, and from soil tend to take much of that fixed carbon back out of that plant biomass and put it back into the atmosphere. The other thing to point out from this kind of image, everything that's red is sort of anthropogenic, so human emissions, thinking about how humans have kind of altered this global sea cycle. And our human emissions of greenhouse gases in general, so burning fossil fuels, is a relatively small flux compared to, say, global photosynthesis, but it's enough that we've kind of altered the balance here. So we have shifted this global carbon cycle so that we're ending up that atmospheric CO2 is increasing overall. So that's some of the global cycle pictures. And the other piece that I want to kind of underline is that photosynthesis, so fixing carbon, kind of that basic concept of plant growth, is that basis for biological carbon sequestration. It's the first step. It's not the only step because plant biomass is not sequestered or permanent carbon, but it's the first step in getting carbon from CO2 into fixed form. So yeah, back to kind of the very basics. So thinking about photosynthesis, going from carbon dioxide using the energy of sunlight to fixed carbon, aka biomass. And maybe that is this cover crop biomass on the right here. We've got probably a lot more photosynthesis happening on this right side than there is, not probably, there's a lot more photosynthesis happening. I took this picture just about a year ago, and we've got a cover cropped field and a fallow field. But this is also paired with respiration. So respiration is taking that fixed C, using it for energy, carbon dioxide as a waste product. So this is kind of the very basic, so not necessarily thinking about the whole global sea cycle at this very local scale. We have this kind of matched photosynthesis and respiration happening. This respiration is both from soil microbes. I know Dr. Pierce is going to talk about microbes in the next session. But overall, I wanted to kind of underline that cover crops do really influence these local carbon dynamics. They're likely increasing photosynthesis, but also might be increasing respiration because we have more fixed carbon to respire. There's more things for those microbes to munch on. But this is also a vast oversimplification. So it's photosynthesis and respiration are not the only processes happening here. So cover crops are influencing local carbon dynamics, but they're also influencing water dynamics and erosion and nutrient cycling. And all of these things have a huge impact on plant growth and productivity. Not necessarily all positive. Maybe some of it's if we have not enough water because that cover crop used up too much, maybe we're going to have reduced yield. If we're actually protecting that soil and preventing soil erosion, we're keeping more of that carbon, more of that soil organic matter on the field, etc. So it's very, very connected. All right, so back to why do we care about carbon? Carbon is, like I mentioned, that major building block of life on Earth. And one of the things that it is a major component of is soil organic matter. So soil organic matter is around 58% carbon. So sometimes we'll talk about soil organic carbon instead of soil organic matter. Another piece to consider is these benefits of building carbon in soil, other than kind of drawing down CO2. So building or at least protecting soil organic matter, soil organic carbon in these systems can help improve water holding capacity, nutrient cycling, and it's associated with higher yield. So this is a figure from a paper, a study in Wisconsin that's associating soil organic matter levels with corn yield in this case. And there was a lot of other factors that go into this model. These are just the actual points. But then this line is the modeled relationship between soil organic matter and yield slowly increasing. This is something that's pretty well understood broadly. Most folks understand, yeah, if you have a higher soil organic matter, you probably have a higher yield potential. But it is awesome to see that quantified as well. All right. So like I said, this is a really brief primer, but I wanted to leave you with a few kind of take-home points that I've already mentioned, that get you thinking about why we care about carbon, how the carbon cycle plays a role within these cover cropping systems. So first off, photosynthesis is that basis for biological carbon sequestration, but it is a very complex system. So plant biomass is not sequestered or permanent soil organic carbon. It's part of a long cycle of fixation, then decomposition, stabilization over time, resulting in eventually, hopefully, some increase in soil organic matter. But there are many benefits to building and protecting the soil organic carbon beyond reducing atmospheric CO2. So cover crops are one way to do this. We're going to talk about lots of other ways to do this today, whether that's reducing tillage, having permanent living roots that are actually protecting the soil from erosion, etc. But if we have more photosynthesis, we have more fixed carbon, that is kind of a step in the right direction, at least. That's kind of starting this cycle of carbon sequestration. So with that, thank you guys for listening. And I know this is maybe not the most exciting topic for the very first talk of the day, but hopefully a good primer as we think about a lot of these other factors.